Hey y'all, I'm James Wright, and welcome to my shop.
Stop.
What?
Our shop.
Oh, yeah. She's in the shop today, and we're doing the second video on making this bench. So let's dive in and see what she can do. And it's legs day. So the first thing we need to do is create a little pattern. And this pattern will actually be the fake tenon that will go through the legs we're creating. I could make this a little bit later, but it's just easier to do it now. And you want to make this the exact same dimension as the tenon that will go into the leg. Either you can make the pattern first and then make the tenon match it, or you can make the tenon first and then make the pattern match it. And really all it is a block of wood that is exactly the same size as the tenon you've been using. Now, if you really want to, you could use the tenon, but sometimes it's easier to have a sacrificial piece that you don't mind if it gets busted up. And here she's starting to learn about the joys of long rips.
There is no joy in that.
Let's go back and clean up these saw marks, do a little bit of plane working on it, and get this exactly what we want. We want it to be nice and smooth because we need to be able to put it into the work and sandwich it. Now the legs are going to be laminated out of 3 pieces, so there'll be a piece that goes on the other side of this, and then 2 pieces that butt into it. And now with all those pieces, we need to cut them out, so it's going to be a lot of cross-cutting. There will be, on each leg, there'll be 2 long pieces on the outside of the leg, and then on the inside there'll be 1 medium coming down to the tenon, and 1 small going up to the tenon. And those will need 1 each of those for the legs. So that means 4 pieces per leg, 16 pieces total, a lot of cross-cutting. Another good skill to learn.
Yay.
It's easy to make 1 pattern for each of them, and that way you can lay out the pattern and mark it off of that every time rather than trying to mark off and hope your measurements are close. It's always best to make reality and then check it. And so we can cut up all these pieces. Now we want to make sure the pieces that are on the inside, we won't be able to plane those up or clean them up later. So we want to make sure those are all clean and smooth and exactly what we want. So we can sandwich them all together in the vise and then plane them down. And that way they will fit against that pattern, which you can see where my finger's holding down there. And we'll have these in there. So we'll have a long piece on the bottom, put some glue on that where the pattern isn't. We want to make sure this pattern is in the same spot on all the legs. So we actually have lines that we're lining it up with. Then we can put the small piece on the bottom of the leg, put the big piece on the top of the leg, and then put glue on it. Don't put glue on the pattern. Otherwise, you'll have problems getting it out. Then put the top one on. You can see how they're hanging out a little bit on either end. That's not a problem because we cut them all long so that we have something to work with. And later on, we'll cut those to what they need to be exactly. Then clamp them all down. And before you squeeze them out completely, make sure you tap things around and get them nice and square. Once all the clamps are in place, you can then pound out that pattern and then glue up the next one. And that way you can have 1 pattern for all 4 legs rather than making 4 individual patterns. Let them sit overnight, come back, and then we can take the clamps off. And you can see how this makes a mortise a lot easier than actually going and chopping it out. So anytime you can use the laminated method, go ahead and use it. Now it's time to make these stretchers, and these are 4-foot long stretchers that will go between the legs, and they will have angled tenons on them. So we're going to lay out exactly what we want the tenon to be, and lo and behold, this is the exact same size as that pattern we created. Isn't that nice? We're going to cut in the cheeks on all of them, and then rip them down to make them the same size as the pattern we created earlier. And this is a lot of ripping. 4 rips per tenon, 4 tenons per board. Excuse me, 2 rips per tenon, 4 tenons per board, 8 total. And it's a good time to learn resawing. And Sarah tended to like the Japanese saw, but we went back and forth with them. This one takes a little less force, but it's harder to control. A Western saw is easier to control, but that means it can often go off course. And so if you find yourself over-controlling, maybe try a Japanese saw. So once we get these all ripped down, they're basically the size, but they're rough. We want to clean them up a little bit. So we'll put it in the vise and chop in. And normally we would plane this down, but you can't plane right up against the shoulder. So we're going to chisel in right up against the shoulder and get that down to exactly where we want it. And then we can come into the plane. Make sure you chisel toward yourself. It's much safer that way.
Shh.
There's a camera on the other side, so you can't do that. So then we could take the plane and remove the rest of it. But here we're actually making the wedges, and these are out of 1/2-inch oak. We're going to lay them all out on this, and we're going to mark out, I think we marked out 6 of them just in case, because you tend to split this off when you're ripping thin stock. So drawing out a few extras is a wise choice. And we did them all in pencil because they don't it doesn't really matter if they are exactly right, because we're going to plane them all up and make them match. So doing them in pencil, it's okay because we're going to have a little bit of leeway. Once we get them all cut, we can sandwich them all together in the vise and then plane them all down to be the exact same angle as each other. If any of them need any little detail work, we can do them individually, but it's nice to do them all as a mass. Now we have the wedges. We need to cut the mortise through the tenon that they'll fit into. So to do that, we'll put the tenon into the leg, and we can then put the wedge on the tenon to mark it out. Let me show you that here in a moment. We're going to actually mark on the leg so we know where one edge of the wedge is, one line of the wedge. Then put the wedge on there and mark the other side. And then we'll have two lines knowing exactly where the wedge needs to go through the wood. Use a mortising gauge to mark the two sides of the wedge mortise, and then mark the front and back. On the back one, we actually want to back the line up toward the shoulder a little bit. We want a gap in there so that it will actually suck the leg tight up against the shoulder. We'll come in with auger bits and remove the majority of the waste. You want to make sure you're following the lines, not going vertical. So it might be easier to put this in the vise at an angle so that the brace is vertical. But most of the time, it's just easier to eyeball down the brace and sight along the line so that you can make sure you're in line with the line rather than just being vertical. And now we have the majority of this cleaned out. We can come back in and chisel it out. Stay away from the lines as long as you can, but then come in and pare it out nice and smooth. Here you can see the back one is being moved back about 1/8 inch. That'll give us that space to allow the wedge to suck this in tight up against the shoulder of the mortise. Once we get the front and back chopped down, then we can come in and pare out the two sides using a little bit larger chisel. And we'll get this as close as we can and then fit the wedge in there and see what needs to be cleaned out. Then you can come in with a file or a rasp, or in this case, a curved tooth file. If you want to see more about that, I just did a video on this channel this week talking about different types of files. That makes it very easy to clean it out and make it really nice and smooth inside. We want a nice tight fit, so when we pound it down, it's not quite halfway, because over the years, the wedge will compress, the mortise will expand, and so this will sink down in a little lower every time you tap it. So leave yourself a little bit of future movement in there. And it's amazing how stiff these are. Once you actually tap them all in, these legs become solid, and it provides a lot of rigidity to this bench. So it'll be kind of fun. Next time we'll be doing the next stretchers on it, but this was a very fun project. Yay!
Check out my wife's
One more step towards completion.
So there you have it. This was, I'm really liking the way my wife's legs are coming out. This is lots of fun. Yeah, do you have fun with this?
I had more fun with this than the bench top, I think.
Yeah, you like the tusked tenons?
Yes, I like chiseling.
So we still have a good ways to go on it. Next time we have the stretchers that go front to back between the legs. And then we'll have a last video of all the final details and finishing. So still got a ways to go, but hopefully it'll be done sometime in 2022. Ha! So if you have any questions, comments, ideas, let me know those down below. And I do want to say a huge thank you to all the patrons on Patreon, everyone who is scrolling over on the side. People who have clicked that join button, thank you. I cannot say it enough, because literally without you, this just would not be happening. So thank you. So if you want to find out more about that, you can go down below and find out more about Patreon, or click the little join button down there and become a member here on YouTube. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day.
You heard of legs for days? In this case, it took days for legs.